Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro-Revenge story. So, Emma started working for a university in 2020 as an administrative assistant. During those early days, she handled various tasks, including drafting the school handbook. In the handbook, she specifically included a section about staff being required to participate in professional development. After working her way up through several promotions, she secured a manager position in the department and launched an initiative to ensure all staff under her supervision had approved time for professional development conferences. Susan, her immediate supervisor, consistently opposed this idea, but Emma eventually approached Susan's boss, whom we'll call David. "David, I've been reviewing our professional development policies," Emma said during their meeting. "I believe we need to implement a more structured approach to conference attendance." David, being the supportive leader he was, listened intently and said, "That makes sense. What do you have in mind?" Once Emma had built enough credibility within the university, she circumvented Susan and obtained David's approval for department-wide conference attendance. Throughout 2024, staff members could select any conference within the continental United States to attend, fully funded by the university. The process was straightforward. Employees would return with detailed session notes, conference schedules, and present their key takeaways during weekly department meetings. It was a simple way to boost morale and professional growth, until someone decided to take advantage of the system. One day, Susan was chatting with other department heads in the break room. "You wouldn't believe the amazing time I had swimming with dolphins during my conference trip," she boasted loudly. "It was such an incredible experience." Susan later told Emma directly, "You should try it sometime." Emma mentioned this during our nightly conversation, and having grown up in Miami, where Susan had attended her conference, I perked up. "Wait, where did she go swimming with dolphins?" I asked. "That popular marine park with the jumping dolphin logo," Emma replied. "But they close at 5:30, I said, frowning. "How did she manage that during a conference?" Emma, who had access to Susan's submitted itinerary, grabbed her phone and started checking the records. Her eyes widened as she realized the conference schedule had no gaps during the marine park's operating hours. "This doesn't add up," she muttered, pulling up more documents. Emma meticulously gathered evidence. Flight records, hotel bookings, conference schedules, and reimbursement claims. She also verified the marine park's operating hours. The documentation showed Susan couldn't have possibly attended the dolphin experience during regular business hours without skipping conference sessions she'd claimed to attend in her report. "I can't believe she'd do this," Emma said while compiling the evidence. "We worked so hard to establish this program." Emma drafted a detailed report, including all the documentation, social media photos from both the marine park and other tourist attractions Susan had visited, and sent everything to David. The next morning, Emma texted me, "David just called everyone into his office. He's furious. He's interviewing everyone Susan bragged to about her trip." Within a week, Susan was terminated for attending only one session of the 3-day conference, falsifying reports, misusing company funds for personal entertainment, and submitting fraudulent time cards. Although Emma's report remained anonymous, Susan somehow knew. "You'll regret this," Susan texted Emma repeatedly until the university's legal team sent a cease and desist letter. The aftermath hit Susan hard. With her husband unemployed, she had to downgrade from her luxury SUV to a compact car. She'd also just closed on a new house days before her termination, leaving her without income for the mortgage. While I felt a twinge of sympathy about her housing situation, I remembered all the times Susan had stolen credit for Emma's work, dumped her responsibilities on Emma, and countless other unprofessional behaviors I'd heard about during our bedtime conversations. In the end, Susan faced the consequences of her own actions. The next one is an entitled people story. 5 years ago, I inherited a small cabin from my grandfather on the edge of a beautiful woodland area about 45 minutes from the city where I work. It's nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom cabin with a small kitchen, living room, and a wraparound porch that's perfect for watching the sunset. My grandfather built it himself in the 70s, and it's been in our family ever since. I'd always loved visiting as a kid, and when he passed away, he left it to me in his will. The timing couldn't have been better. I was going through a rough divorce and needed somewhere to escape the drama of the city. I also owned a small apartment closer to my workplace, which I stayed at during the week when I needed to be in the office early. For about 3 years, everything was peaceful. I'd spend my weekends at the cabin, hiking in the woods, doing repairs, and generally enjoying the solitude. Then about 2 years ago, a developer bought a large tract of land adjacent to the Woodland area and started building a suburban community. Within 6 months, what was once untouched forest became a cookie-cutter neighborhood with matching roofs and perfectly manicured lawns. I didn't love the change in scenery, but I figured it wouldn't affect me much. My cabin was set back from the new development, and I still had woods on 3 sides. I kept to myself and assumed my new neighbors would do the same. That's when I met Karen, the newly elected president of the Homeowners Association for the development. She showed up at my door one Saturday morning while I was having coffee on my porch. "Hello," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm Karen Mitchell, president of the Woodland Heights HOA. I wanted to welcome you to our community." I looked at her confused. "Thanks, but I've been here for years. My property isn't part of your development." Her smile faltered slightly. "Well, that's what I wanted to talk about. Our HOA rules cover this entire area now, and we've noticed several violations on your property." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Excuse me, my property was here long before your development. I'm not part of your HOA." Karen pulled out a folder and started flipping through papers. "According to our records, this entire area falls under our jurisdiction now, and there are some serious concerns. Your cabin doesn't match our approved architectural style. Your yard isn't properly landscaped, and we don't allow secondary properties. Our rules clearly state that members can only have one primary residence." "I'm not a member," I said firmly, "and I'm not interested in becoming one. This property has been in my family for nearly 50 years. Karen's pleasant demeanor disappeared entirely. "Well, that's unfortunate, because we'll have to take action if these violations aren't addressed. The HOA board has already voted on this matter." "Action? What kind of action?" I asked, starting to get irritated. "Fines to start with, and if those aren't paid, we'll place a lien on your property. Eventually, we could force a sale if necessary." I laughed, thinking this had to be some kind of joke. "You can't do any of that. I never signed any HOA agreement. My property predates your development. You have absolutely no authority here." Karen gave me a condescending smile. "We'll see about that. You have 30 days to bring your property into compliance or face the consequences." She handed me a thick stack of papers outlining the violations and walked back down my gravel driveway to her shiny SUV. I was stunned. After she left, I immediately called a friend who worked in real estate law. He confirmed what I already knew. They couldn't force me into an HOA that formed after my ownership was established, but he warned me that some aggressive HOAs try to bully people anyway, hoping they'll give in rather than fight. I decided to ignore Karen's threats, figuring they were just empty intimidation tactics. But 30 days later, I received an official-looking letter in the mail claiming I owed $2,500 in HOA fines for continued noncompliance. The letter threatened legal action if I didn't pay within 2 weeks. I took the letter to my lawyer friend, who wrote a response explaining that I was not subject to their HOA rules and demanding they cease harassment. We thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, I arrived at my cabin to find a notice of lien posted on my door. They were actually trying to place a lien on my property for unpaid HOA dues and fines. When I checked my mail, there was also a certified letter notifying me that the HOA board had voted to prohibit vacation homes and secondary residences in the area, claiming they decreased property values. Now I was angry. I called my lawyer friend again, who suggested we file for an injunction to stop the harassment and prevent them from filing any actual liens against my property. But before we could do that, things escalated further. I pulled up to my cabin one Friday evening to find 3 large men in my yard, measuring the property boundaries with surveying equipment. "What are you doing on my property?" I demanded, getting out of my car. "HOA business," one of them replied gruffly. "We're reassessing the community boundaries." "You're trespassing," I informed them. "Leave now or I'm calling the police." They ignored me and continued their work, so I called the police, who arrived about 20 minutes later. The men showed the officer some paperwork which seemed to satisfy him. "Sorry," the officer told me, "but they have permits for this survey work." "This is private property," I insisted. "They can't just come on my land without permission." The officer shrugged. "Take it up with the county. They have the proper permits." After the police left, one of the men smirked at me. "The HOA always wins these fights, buddy. Save yourself the trouble and sell now while you still can." That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I drove into town and went straight to the county records office. I spent hours digging through property records until I found what I needed: the original survey of my grandfather's land, the deed transfer to me, and most importantly, the exact boundaries of the new development. Just as I suspected, my property was completely separate from the development. They had no legal right to claim jurisdiction over my land. Armed with this information, I made copies of everything and headed straight to my lawyer friend's office. He looked through the documents and grinned. "This is exactly what we need. They're overstepping, and we can prove it." We filed an emergency injunction the following Monday to prevent the HOA from filing any liens or taking any action against my property. The judge granted it temporarily until a full hearing could be scheduled. 2 weeks later, I found myself in court facing Karen and the HOA's lawyer. They argued that their development agreement with the county gave them authority over all properties in the designated area, including mine. When it was our turn, my lawyer presented the boundary documents, the original deed, and a statement from the county zoning office confirming that my property was never included in the development plans. Furthermore, Your Honor, my lawyer added, we have evidence that Miss Mitchell and the HOA board have engaged in a pattern of harassment and intimidation against my client, including making false claims about their authority, attempting to impose fines without any legal basis, and threatening to place fraudulent liens on his property. The judge listened carefully to both sides. Then he looked directly at Karen and the HOA lawyer. Let me be clear, he said firmly. A homeowner cannot be forced into an HOA that was formed after they purchased their property. Period. The plaintiff's land is clearly outside your development boundaries according to county records. Your attempts to impose your rules on him constitute harassment and potentially fraud. Karen tried to interrupt, but the judge silenced her with a look. I'm granting a permanent injunction prohibiting the Woodland Heights HOA from taking any action against the plaintiff's property. Additionally, I'm ordering the HOA to pay the plaintiff's legal fees. And I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential investigation into fraudulent practices. Karen's face turned bright red. The HOA lawyer whispered something to her, but she shook him off and stormed out of the courtroom. I thought that would be the end of it, but the HOA had one more trick up their sleeve. A week after the court ruling, I received a notice from the county that the HOA had filed an appeal and was also petitioning for a zoning change that would incorporate my property into their development area. Back to my lawyer we went. This time, he suggested we go on the offensive. We filed a countersuit against the HOA for harassment, attempted fraud, and malicious prosecution. We also contacted other property owners around the development to see if they'd experienced similar problems. It turned out I wasn't the only one. 3 other families with properties predating the development had been harassed by the HOA. Together, we formed a small coalition and expanded our lawsuit to include all of their experiences. The local newspaper caught wind of the story and ran a front-page article about HOA overreach and intimidation. The publicity was terrible for the new development, with potential buyers expressing concerns about buying into such an aggressive HOA. Sales slowed dramatically, and several board members started distancing themselves from Karen and her tactics. The developer, worried about the negative publicity affecting his investment, stepped in and forced the HOA to drop the appeal and zoning petition. 2 months later, we received a settlement offer. The HOA would formally acknowledge that our properties were not part of their jurisdiction, pay our legal fees, and issue a public apology. Karen would step down as president. We accepted the settlement, though I would have enjoyed seeing the case through to trial. The day after the settlement was finalized, I received an unexpected visitor at my cabin, one of the HOA board members. I wanted to apologize personally, he said, looking genuinely remorseful. Karen convinced us that incorporating all the surrounding properties would increase our property values. She didn't tell us she was harassing you or that your property clearly wasn't part of our development. Why did everyone just go along with her? I asked. He sighed. Most people don't want to rock the boat, and Karen was persuasive. She made it sound like she knew what she was doing. She used to work in real estate and claimed this was common practice. A week later, I saw a moving truck outside Karen's house. Apparently, the embarrassment of being forced to resign and publicly apologize was too much for her. I heard she moved to a condo in the city, one without an HOA. As for me, I still spend my weekends at my grandfather's cabin. I've even become friendly with some of the new neighbors from the development, who often stop by to chat when they're out walking. The new HOA president is much more reasonable and understands where their authority begins and ends. The woods on the other side of my property remain untouched, and I've started thinking about how to protect them from future development. Maybe a conservation easement would be the way to go. One thing's for sure, I fought for my right to keep my second home, and I won. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when they come armed with bylaws and architectural guidelines. Your property rights are worth protecting, and no self-appointed neighborhood dictator should be able to take them away. The next one is a malicious compliance story. If you've seen my other posts in this subreddit, they all seem to do something with trucking. Trucking and diesel mechanics, which was my entire adult careers. I think truck driving is mostly about compliance and malicious compliance. I hope this fits here. In high school, I went to tech school for auto mechanics. Since I was little, I always wanted to be a mechanic. Upon graduation, I went directly to work as a mechanic. The work didn't bother me so much, but I hated the shop. One day I realized the best part of my day was the test drive. So I thought being a truck driver would be the perfect job for me, so I worked towards that goal. Soon after my 20th birthday, I got a job driving a truck. I loved the open road. Back then, Pennsylvania used the Class 1, 2, 3 license system. Class 1 was for 18-wheelers. Class 2 was for large trucks over 30K lbs. Gross vehicle weight. Class 3 was passenger vehicles. The company I worked for had 2 delivery trucks and I was driver #2. All was great till about 3.5 years after I started, Pennsylvania decided to go with the federal commercial driver's license. The classes all worked the same with differences. Instead of 1, 2, 3, it is now A, B, C. Class A is 18 wheelers, Class B is all other trucks over 27K lbs, and Class C was passenger vehicles. Class 3 and Class C vehicles only needed a regular driver's license to drive them. All other classes required extra testing to get the proper license. Once you had your truck permit, you had to be able to get a truck and licensed driver to test drive and practice with. Then take the driving test, followed by the written test to get your license. I have a problem. I don't know another CDL driver, nor anyone who will allow me to borrow a truck to take the test. My only other option is to enroll into a truck driving school. At 20, living on my own, that was not an option. Our trucks were originally rated at Class 3 because they had no air brakes and weighed 28K lbs. The company chose this route so they could pay drivers less. However, with the federal class system, our trucks are now Class B, requiring a CDL. So, the characters. There is me, OP, a 20M truck driver, Fred 40-isham, the company part owner, John 30-isham, my manager under Fred. Pennsylvania had a 3-month deadline to get your CDL or you cannot drive. One day John asks me, "Are you going to get your CDL?" I say, "I don't know." "Is the company going to pay for it?" "I don't know," said John. "Let me talk to Fred." At this point, I am the only driver they have. John and I work together well. I have a great working relationship with everyone in the company, and our customers as well. Well, everyone but Fred. Fred bought into the company a year ago. From day one, he had an issue with me. He always assumed I was doing the wrong thing, but never had true cause. Since day one, he would only speak to me if he had to. No small talk, no smile. A month passes, and I do not get an answer one way or the other. Till Fred asks me one day, "Are you going to get your CDL?" I say, "Are you paying for it?" "No," he says. So, I reply no as well. Another month goes by, and Fred and I have the same conversation. But this time, Fred asked, "What are you going to do for work?" I looked at him dead in the eye and said, "This isn't the only job." The malicious compliance. What I knew that Fred apparently didn't realize was that in just over 2 weeks, they could not deliver product unless they hire someone for a lot more money to drive. So, they were going to have to comply to my demand or lose 85% of their business. With almost 2 weeks to go till the deadline, John says to me, "On Saturday, take the company pickup, drive to Harrisburg, and get your permit. You will be paid for your time." I found a few weeks earlier that if I drove the same truck for 3 years, I could get a waiver of the permit. As long as the company owner is willing to sign an affidavit that I drove there 3 years or more, I could skip all of the driving portion, get my permit, then take the written test, and get my CDL. I did not tell Fred that. Instead, I went to the other owner of the company and had him sign. Saturday comes, I get on the road at 4 a.m. to be in Harrisburg, DMV by 5:30 or 6 a.m. When I get there, I am surprised. The line for the DMV runs out the door and around the block. I estimate when they open at 7 a.m., I will be about 500th in line. It took another 2.5 HRs, but I walked out with my permit. Now for the test. To Pennsylvania's credit, they had a firehouse in every county as a temporary CDL testing site, due to the volume of people who needed testing. I tried to get into 3 different testing sites, but they were packed and closed before I navigated the line to get in. After that, my office called around to reserve a spot for me. Finally, on Thursday afternoon, I get a call to get to a particular testing site in 1 hour, and I have a seat to take the test. The problem? I was an hour and a half away from the site. Well, I floored it, bent a few laws, but I got to the site as they were closing the doors and got in. To get a CDL, you must pass the general truck test and the air brake test. Then you can take the test for endorsements on your license. They include tanker, school bus, passenger, bus, double buses, think long bus that bends in the middle, double and triple trailers, commonly seen behind FedEx and UPS trucks, and lastly, hazmat, for trucks hauling hazardous materials over 50 pounds. I was there to take 2 tests. I took all but one. I took every test but hazmat. I was the last person to walk in and sit down with my test. I was the first to leave. As I was walking out, I heard one guy say to his friend, "I guess he failed." In the back of the room was a computer that graded your test and gave you the score right then. 80 and above to pass. Fingers crossed my test was ran through the computer. I passed all tests with my lowest score being an 87. Each test scored individually. That Saturday, same deal. Take the pickup, drive to Harrisburg, get my license. But this time I left at 3 a.m. and good thing I did. This time I was about 300th in line. It still took about 2 hours once I got inside. By the time I came out with my license, the line was over 1,500 people and growing, all in all. Over that 2-week period, I got about 25 HRs of overtime, a CDL, and a pay raise. I left the company about a year later. I continued to drive trucks for the next 11 years, before becoming a diesel tech. Having a CDL was very helpful through my diesel career. In most cases, having the CDL got me to the front of the line and/or increased my starting salary. In some shops I worked, I was the only tech legal to drive a truck on test drives. The next one is an entitled people story. So I moved to the Midwest from California 6 years ago to basically start over and be closer to my mom. I moved into an apartment about 7-8 miles away from my mom and stepdad. My half-sister, we share a dad, but my mom is her stepmom, moved here with her 3 kids a few years before I did. Let's call her Cindy. She was going through a nasty divorce and needed a new place to live, so my mom offered to let her sublet a house she and my dad got back in 2006 before they divorced. Cindy and her 3 kids moved in probably around 2013. I might have the year wrong, but I think I'm close. In 2013, the kids would have been 5, 7, and 23. My mom and stepdad did a lot for Cindy, and over the years it became clear she was taking advantage of their kindness. They paid thousands of dollars for her divorce lawyer, which she never offered to pay back. They gave her a used car, which she went around and sold without giving them any money for it. Not once did she pay rent on time. My mom oftentimes would have to ask about 3 weeks into the month where the rent was. She claimed she couldn't afford the house with her child support and alimony, but she refused to get a job for most of the time she was living there. For about 5 years, she refused to work. In 2019, Cindy had gotten a job in sales selling carpet. She still claimed the rent was too much for her, and my mom often had to subsidize her. So my mom tells her she'd like to sell the house, and she'd give Cindy a year to move out. My mom would send her links for places to rent, but would never get a response. Cindy wasn't making an effort to move out. A year goes by, and my mom confronts her about it, extending the move-out date by another 3 months. I didn't witness this exchange, but according to other family members, Cindy was livid. I once visited Cindy at work, this is now 2020, and she told me it was illegal of my mom to force her to move out during a moratorium. She left my mom's house a wreck. I helped my mom and stepdad clean everything. There was cat poop in almost every room, and even a pile of crap on the toilet seat that my stepdad cleaned up. She also left a lot of her belongings there, including large stuff too, a huge fake plant that went up nearly to the ceiling, a desk, foosball table, etc., which my mom and I either sold for her or packed up and gave to her. She found an apartment for herself and her 3 kids kind of in between me and mom. Her kids at this point would be 12, 14, and 30. Now Cindy's oldest, we'll call him Garrett, is an alcoholic who struggles holding on to a job. He'd constantly get into fights with his mother and then would come stay with me for a night or 2 before returning home. Well, Cindy permanently kicked him out in 2023, and he ended up living in his car. His AC in his car quit working that summer, so I took him in. He was sort of an ass while he stayed with me, eating my food and never replacing it, complaining about my messes when he was living with me rent-free, etc. One weekend I noticed $60 missing from my wallet. I confronted him about it in a text, and he admitted to taking it. I didn't know what to do. I was working full-time and had a part-time job on the side to make extra money. I couldn't afford to have someone living with me who steals. I left my partner's place to go home to talk to him about it. I had told my mom my concerns prior to confronting him, asking her for advice. When I made it home, my mom had texted him saying she couldn't believe he'd steal from me. He tried turning the tables around on me, angry that I had told my mom. I remained calm, but I did call him out for his behavior. The next day I threw him out in a text when I wasn't home. Big mistake. Over the next few months I noticed different things missing. Books, board and card games, DVDs, even my vibrator. Since this happened, I was able to take Garrett to small claims, and he paid me $400. He told me he stole my stuff because he was mad that I kicked him out. No remorse or apology. He acts like he's the victim and that I wronged him. Cindy was embarrassed that I took him in and tried spreading lies about me. She even tried spreading lies about my mom, claiming she was only given a couple of months to move out. Thankfully, no one in the family believes her. My mom is still in contact with both of them, but I'm not. The next one is an entitled parent story. For context, I work with my dad sometimes for his catering company. He had an event with a lot of people and needed extra help, so I came with him. I woke up at 6 a.m., got there at 7 a.m., and started preparing the food until people arrived outside at about 10 a.m. My job was to bring the food outside on carts and set it on the table. The event lasted until 1:30 p.m., and then we cleaned up and left around 4:30. It was a lot, but honestly, it was nice to be able to help out and do something important. Later that day, my dad gave me a $100 bill for helping out, and as expected, my mom freaked out and said I didn't deserve that much money and said to give it to her instead. This is basically how the conversation went. Mom, squinting, "Where did you get that from?" Me, "Dad gave it to me for helping out at the catering event today." Mom, $100? That's way too much. You don't need that much money. Me, I woke up at 6 a.m., worked non-stop from 7 to 4:30. That's 9 hours of work. Mom, still, you're just a helper, not a full employee. You should give that to me so it's not wasted. Me, what? No way. I earned it. Dad gave it to me. Mom, you live under my roof. That money should go back to the family. Me, and I just helped feed like 500 people today. I think I can keep one bill without it being seen as a crime. Mom, stares at me like I'm crazy. I just want to be able to have my own money and my own stuff. It just feels good to have something that I paid for. I've had so many times where she'll break my things or take my money because I didn't buy it myself. Now today she's talking about it again, says I've always been spoiled and that I'm just being stingy for not wanting to give money to her, my mother. Most of me feels like I should have the money, but now my dad has done a complete 180 and says I should give the money back as well. So I don't know if I should just give it back so things don't escalate for no good reason, or if I should just keep the money I worked for. Anyway,